Yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we'll be reading from Canto 3, Chapter 15, Verse 15. Again, it's Canto 3, Chapter 15, Verse 15. Yatra Chadya Pumanaste Bhagavan Shabda Gochara Sattvam Vishtabhya Virajam Swanam No Mridayan Vrisha Yatra Chadya Pumanaste Bhagavan Shabda Gochara Sattvam Vishtabhya Virajam Swanam No Mridayan Vrisha. Word by word. Yatra in the Vaikuntha planets. Cha and Adya original. Human person. Aste is there. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shabda Gochara, understood through Vedic literature. Sattvam, the mode of goodness. Vistabhya, accepting. Virajam, uncontaminated. Swanam, of his own associates. Na, us. Mridayan, increasing happiness. Risha, the personification of religious principles. Translation. In the Vaikuntha planets is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the original person and who can be understood through Vedic literature. He is full of the uncontaminated mode of goodness, with no place for passion or ignorance. He contributes religious process for the devotees. One more time, the translation is, in the Vaikuntha planets is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the original person and who can be understood through Vedic literature. He's full of the uncontaminated mode of goodness, with no place for passion or ignorance. He contributes religious process for the devotees. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The kingdom of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the spiritual sky cannot be understood by any process other than hearing from the description of the Vedas. No one can go see it. In this material world also, one who is unable to pay to go to a far distant place by motorized conveyances can only understand about that place from authentic books. Similarly, the Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky are beyond this material sky. The modern scientists who are trying to travel in space are having difficulty going even to the nearest planet, the moon, to say nothing of the highest planets within the universe. There's no possibility that they can go beyond the material sky, enter the spiritual sky, and see for themselves the spiritual planets Vaikuntha. Therefore, the kingdom of God in the spiritual sky can be understood only through the authentic descriptions of the Vedas and Puranas. In the material world, there are three modes of material qualities. Goodness, passion, and ignorance. But in the spiritual world, there's no trace of the modes of passion and ignorance. There's only the mode of goodness, which is uncontaminated by any tinge of ignorance or passion. In the material world, even if a person is completely in goodness, he's sometimes subject to be polluted by tinges of the modes of ignorance and passion. But in the Vaikuntha world, the spiritual sky, only the mode of goodness in its pure form exists. The Lord and his devotees reside in the Vaikuntha planets, and they are of the same transcendental quality, namely Shuddha Sattva, the mode of pure goodness. The Vaikuntha planets are very dear to the Vaishnavas, and for the progressive march of the Vaishnavas toward the kingdom of God, the Lord himself helps his devotees. Okay. So, we just read from Canto 3, Chapter 3, and this is Canto 3, Chapter 15, verse 15. So this chapter, the title is called A Description of the Kingdom of God. That's the name of this overall chapter. And so this chapter, Maitreya Muni has been telling Vidura what the kingdom of God looks like what is happening there. He's talking about what the demigods are doing, what the different planets are, how they're functioning, information about the four Kumaras, what do the devotees do in Vaikuntha, like the different sort of things he's describing to Vidura in this whole process. It's actually a very fascinating description to this whole chapter of how Maitreya Muni breaks down what the kingdom of God looks like. It's very encouraging, and gives like this nice view of how Vaikuntha functions, basically. So this verse, this specific verse, um, Maitreya Muni is talking about the Krishna's like how difficult it is to understand him. Then he makes 3 points in this verse. The first point is that Krishna is the original person who can be only understood through Vedic literature. So he's making that point very clear, right? Maitreya Muni, that Krishna can only be understood through Vedic literature. There's no other way to understand him. The second point he's making is that with the three modes of material nature, mode of goodness, passion, ignorance, Krishna is pure. He's full of the uncontaminated mode of goodness. There's no tinge or slight mix of passion and ignorance. So he's making clear that Krishna is fully pure in the pure mode of goodness. And the third point that he's making in this verse is that Krishna actually contributes to the progress of a devotee. He actually enhances that and helps the devotee progress in their life. So it's 3 points he makes. Krishna is the original person who can only be understood through Vedic literature. Second point he's making is Krishna's full of uncontaminated mode of goodness. There's no other modes of material nature mixed in Krishna. And the third thing is that he contributes to the religious progress of devotees. And so I thought that for what really, sort of made me really, the part that really stuck out to me was this first point that Krishna is the original person who can only be understood through Vedic literature. We sometimes read that, hear that, but to me, I wanted to sort of internalize what that part really means. What does that point really mean? And so the purport, Prabhupada is explaining that, like if you were to just try to logically or analytically try to understand Krishna within like the functions that we've been given in this material world, like if you take science or math, you can't use those things to understand Krishna. Like that's not enough to understand Krishna. That's what Prabhupada is saying in the purport, that through authentic descriptions in the Vedas and Puranas, you can understand Krishna. So this point is important because without knowing the truth of Krishna, like knowing Krishna Tattva, that Krishna is the absolute, we actually won't get the full benefit of chanting. So it's a very important point that to receive the full benefit of chanting, to understand the full Krishna Tattva is very important. And so with that, Krishna is the source of everything. And so the next few minutes, I just wanted to spend time understanding why is it that Krishna can only be understood through Vedic literature? What is it? Like, what are some examples or things that make it only understandable through Vedic literature? So I wanted to spend some time on that. And before going into that, I wanted to lay out some principles or some descriptions of what Krishna Tattva is, like who is Krishna. And so the first part is that the Krishna source is the source of everything. There's not anything that he's not the source of. So because of that, there's actually no void in creation. There's no missing gap in creation where there's a gap that needs to be filled, right? There's no void like that. So the good and the bad, it comes from Krishna. So that's a fundamental principle that we need to understand in terms of describing Krishna. And the nature of Krishna is described by his name and activities. Those are two things, are ways to access Krishna, is to understand about his name and the activities that he's performing. And so by hearing the sound vibration of Krishna's name permits us to understand a bit about him. Um, and when you look at Krishna's activities, we have to try to remove the material lens of morality and basic things to understand Krishna's activity. So those are the two sort of fundamental principles that I wanted to call out when we think about understanding Krishna Tattva. Who is Krishna? So the next part is the last principle in this part is that to really connect with Krishna, what's the most important thing is developing a relationship. So when we try to understand his name and his activities, that allows us to develop a relationship with Krishna, Sambandha Gyan. That's what it allows us to do. So now the point comes, which is again in this translation, Maitreya Muni is telling Vidura that Krishna can only be understood through Vedic literatures. And so I wanted to give you a few examples of why that might be the case. Why can we just not understand him through our logic or our analytical power? So there's a couple examples. One is when Lord Nrsimhadev comes down to rescue Prahlad Maharaj, um, he exhibits a lot of anger. Even after Hiranyakashipu has been defeated, he's ripped Hiranyakashipu apart, and he's sitting on the throne, and uh, he's still very angry, and so the demigods are very scared. Even the goddess of fortune is very scared, and so then that's when the demigods ask Prahlad Maharaj to go and pacify Lord Nrsimhadev to see what's going on. And so it's described that even anger comes from Krishna, right? And um, that it can be described as anger that Nrsimhadev can exhibit. It's okay for him to exhibit anger. It's not like a bad thing for him to have that anger. And only Prahlad Maharaj could pacify that anger. So that's one example of where it's not, and it's not normal. You could say, hey, that, why is God angry? But the fact is that he was angry for the reasons that had transpired in Prahlad Maharaj's Leela. Um, the other example is um, the other part is that at the same time, Krishna is also known for exhibiting truth, um, and truth comes from Krishna as well. And so there's many examples of where Krishna will say a statement that may seem a bit crooked, but it's actually true in terms of what he's saying. And there's many instances of that in the Mahabharata time frame. The other part that is often questioned is morality. Like, how do you apply morality in Krishna consciousness? Meaning, like the society has a view of what morality should be, right? But how do you understand Krishna in the sense of morality, the way it's described today in our society? Again, if you try to understand Krishna through how society defines morality, it'll be hard to do that. An example of that is um, Mahatma Gandhi wrote a commentary on Bhagavad Gita. And in that commentary, I think Mahatma Gandhi writes that if Krishna induced Krishna to fight on the battlefield, that is truly what Krishna did. He induced Arjuna to fight on the battlefield. Then I will renounce Hinduism. That's what Mahatma Gandhi says. I will quit Hinduism if that is what Krishna said. Basically, Mahatma Gandhi was thinking, my Krishna would never do that. My Krishna would never steal butter. So the yardstick that Mahatma Gandhi had for measuring morality was different. And it's not to say that as devotees we encourage violence, but the observation here is that if one were to apply the principles of nonviolence and apply that to the Mahabharata war, it would break down. It just wouldn't work. It wouldn't connect in any way. So that's an example of where you can take moral principles or what society has put together and apply it to Krishna consciousness, for example. Another example here is yeah, and another example is sort of encouraging Krishna, Lord Chaitanya's principles here. There's a story of Gopinath from the Chaitanya Leela. His name was Gopinath. He was a tax collector for the king, and he was going to be put for death. The king was about to put him up for a death sentence. And different associates of Lord Chaitanya tried to rescue this person Gopinath. And Lord Chaitanya said, "How can we rescue Gopinath? Gopinath has taken the money that was supposed to go to the king, and he spent the money elsewhere. He's taken the tax and he's spent it on other places. He's stolen money from the government." And so in this case, Lord Chaitanya did stand by moral principles. Even if the other devotees were trying to rescue Gopinath, Mahaprabhu said, no, like this is not okay. The story goes that the king asked Gopinath, did not let Gopinath go on the death sentence. The king called Gopinath into assembly and tells Gopinath, you've taken money that belongs to the government. Um, if you're not getting paid enough, then I'll double your salary, but don't steal money from the government. Just don't take money from the government. And Lord Chaitanya questions the king, are you doing this because of me? Because I'm associated with Gopinath? Is that why you're letting him go? And the king said, no, no, it's not because of you, Mahaprabhu, it's because I have a relationship with the family. The Gopinath comes from the family of Ramananda Roy, and I have a special regard there, and that's why I'm not letting Gopinath go on the death sentence. So, Gopinath gets, rescued and he doesn't go on the death sentence. But Gopinath comes and tells Mahaprabhu that, listen, I was destined to be killed, but somehow the opposite happened. I wasn't killed. Um, and he tells Mahaprabhu that, listen, my elder brothers, Raman and Roy, they are very devotional. They are detached from the material world, but I am not. I have this affinity for material enjoyment. And so, Mahaprabhu, the real mercy would have been for you to take this away from me, this attachment for the material world. Um, and if I'd gone to death, it would have been sort of nice. I would have just avoided all this material attachment. And so Mahaprabhu tells him that, you can't just become a renunciate. Like, you need to maintain your family and serve your family in the mood of Krishna. Someone has to make money. Your family is no one else is making money in your family. So you have to make money and you have to serve your family. So the point that's made is that Mahaprabhu put a standard on him, which is, listen, you cannot steal from the government. I won't protect you if you're stealing from the government. And number two, um, you do have to go and have a job and make money for the family. That is your duty. You can't just renounce everything and quit that. And so the point that is made here is, having worldly morality while exercising transcendental reality is important. It's not just morality or Krishna consciousness. It's both are needed. And so we have to live by some sort of theistic conduct. You can't completely just disregard. So we can't imitate what Krishna might do in the Mahabharata or with his other devotees. So again, in this case, Mahaprabhu takes a firm stance of um, following morality, but with um, transcendental framing in mind. The other example that, of course, comes up is the Mother Yashoda and Krishna Lila. Um, a pastime that is, I think, hard to understand by logic and analytical processing. Um, and this pastime in particular, the whole Damodar Lila pastime, has so many commentaries, so many explanations, because that is truly the only way you can understand that pastime, like that entire Lila. So the argument that's brought up here is uh, Krishna's relationship with the gopis. Krishna is uh, enjoying with the gopis, but people make this argument that that's like a man and woman enjoying together, when that's not the case. Krishna and the gopis is not that same scenario. Krishna stealing butter, for example. So oftentimes the blame has come up that, hey, Krishna's stealing. That's not moral. There's something wrong with that. Um, so those are some, common arguments that are brought up in terms of how is that moral, that if he's doing these things. So, and then if you sort of further go down, when the elder gopis would come to Yashoda's home to complain to Yashoda about Krishna stealing butter, it's described that the gopis were actually experiencing ecstatic love for Krishna. They actually, their mood wasn't from a place of anger. In fact, these gopis would come regularly and say bad things about Krishna to Mother Yashoda, about stealing butter or about doing mischief in general. And Krishna would hear the gopis speak that way. And Krishna would tremble and he would look fearful. Then the gopis would see this face of Krishna, and their anxiety would go away, and they would smile at Krishna, actually, seeing that uh, he's such a, that they would know that this is the supreme personality of Godhead. So them coming and scolding Krishna or telling Mother Yashoda, they would actually be feeling ecstatic love. And now, how does one even understand or describe this? It's like two different feelings happening at the same time. So again, there's no logic to explain this. And so I wanted to read a verse. I wanted to read a verse where that describes how the gopis are complaining to Mother Yashoda. And the reason behind reading this is to just understand how they're expressing um, their regard and their how disappointed they are all also at the same time for Krishna. So they say, our dear friend Yashoda, your son sometimes comes to our house before the milking of the cows and releases the calves. And when the master of the house becomes angry, your son merely smiles. Sometimes he devises some process by which he steals palatable curd, butter, and milk, which he then eats and drinks. When the monkeys assemble, he divides it. He divides it with them, and when the monkeys have their bellies so full that they won't take more, he breaks the pots. Sometimes, if he gets no opportunity to steal butter or milk from a house, sorry, 1 second, devotees, 1 second. Sorry, my kids were coming in. Sorry, so let me pick it up. When the monkeys assemble, he divides it with them, and when the monkeys have their bellies so full that they won't take more, he breaks the pots. Sometimes, if he gets no opportunity to steal butter or milk from a house, he will be angry at the householders, and for his revenge, he will agitate the small children by pinching them. Then, when the children begin crying, Krishna will go away. So all these things that the gopis are describing about what Krishna is doing, it might seem like, wow, he's actually very mischievous. And so a moralist might say, this is, what is God doing? It's not, this is not just, this is not okay. And if you keep, reading further, the next verse goes on to say, when the milk and curd are kept high on a swing, hanging from the ceiling, and Krishna and Balaram cannot reach it, they arrange to reach it by piling up various planks and turning upside down the mortar for grinding spices. Being quite aware of the contents of a pot, they poke holes in it. While the elderly gopis go about their household affairs, Krishna and Balaram sometimes go into a dark room, brightening the place with the valuable jewels and ornaments on their bodies and taking advantage of this light by stealing. So yeah, it keeps further going. And so they keep continuing to complain to Mother Yashoda, but in the same verse it says, I'll read this part. Sometimes all the gopis would look at Krishna sitting there, his eyes fearful, so that his mother would not chastise him. And when they saw Krishna's beautiful face, instead of chastising him, they would simply look upon his face and enjoy transcendental bliss. Mother Yashoda would mildly smile at all this fun, and she would not want to chastise her blessed transcendental child. So yeah, this is the description I wanted to read, where um yeah, it's hard to process these activities by moral standards. And this is also describing Mother Yashoda's reaction. It's not like when these complaints are coming in, she's ready to go and uh immediately chastise him. And also the gopis, when they look at Krishna, they're forgetting, they're not, they're just seeing him and just smiling when they're telling all this to Mother Yashoda. So again, all very different feelings and things happening at the very same time that it's hard to just process. Um, that's the specific point I wanted to call about. You can't, if you just take morality and Krishna consciousness together, sometimes they may not fit right away. Another sort of mysterious part is Lord Chaitanya would hear daily from Gadadhar Pandit Bhagavatam. Every day, Mahaprabhu would sit for hours and hours and understand and hear the Srimad Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit. And so one might say, how is the Lord hearing from, getting knowledge from one of his devotees? How is that happening? But he is to sort of set an example here. Um, so I just want to, yeah, circle back to the point of this verse that Krishna is the original person who can only be understood through Vedic literature. Otherwise, it's impossible to understand him through Vedic literature, through commentaries and things like that. So those are the main points I wanted to cover. I'll pause here to see if devotees wanted to add anything or have any comments here.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Uh, so I was just thinking about that Gopinath Acharya's thing, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Lila, right? I mean, Krishna is above the morality, but when it comes to even, I mean, of course, other than in Krishna's pastimes, even other incarnations, right? I mean, many times he followed the principles, right? I mean, he accepting a spiritual master, or even, I mean, only in Krishna's pastimes we see extraordinary activities, but many of other incarnations he performs. I mean, he follows the moral principles, even in Lord Chaitanya's thing, right? I mean, it's very nice. I mean, of course, uh, moral principles only on material level, but as long as one is there and one has to be aligned with those moral principles, right? So, I mean, of course, I mean, I mean, a pure devotee can cross above that, but generally they don't do that because to set an example. So it was nice. I mean, teaching Lord Chaitanya was giving it through. That's it.
Yeah, if we compare Lord Krishna's activities to Lord Ram, to Lord Chaitanya, there's a huge difference. Like
I mean,
Lord
of
Ram,
course, Lord Rama himself is very difficult to understand because he
yeah,
is he is nowhere called as a god. I mean, the way he's acting, but then Krishna is extraordinarily different. So it's very
yeah,
bewildering.
yeah.
I was just thinking. Yeah, of course. Then I mean, people compare God like Krishna, right? I mean, Gandhi's statements about if he doesn't, if he is intriguing or if he is instigating instigating Arjuna for the war, then that doesn't mean that I don't accept Krishna as the Adar is dancing with the gopis.
Yeah, I mean the war one was an interesting one. Like, yeah, the argument of the fact that he induced Arjuna to fight, and someone could misconstrue that as he was the instigator of fighting. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, he's dancing with the gopis.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, the other way, I mean, if one doesn't hear the disciplic succession, I mean, it may be very easy to get into these kind of conclusions. So even the one could be very highly educated or intelligent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's the point that my Muni is also making, that if you just take the activities at face value, you can't understand Krishna. Yeah. Any other points? Otherwise, we can end here. Okay. Thank you, devotees. Hare Krishna. Have a good day. Very well.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare